Welcome back to the WSU Democrats podcast. We have a very special episode for you guys today. My name is Ethan Bishop. I'm the president of the organization, and we're going to let our guest introduce himself here.
Thank you, Ethan. Brian King is my name. I am the chair of the Utah Democratic Party. I have also served in the legislature for 16 years. I'm not there anymore. Ran for governor as the Democratic candidate in 2024. Was elected the chair of the party about a year ago, and enjoyed doing that.
Awesome. And we're also joined by?
I'm Vaughn. I'm the vice president.
Alexandria, the Women's Committee chair.
Mike Ortega, the campus affairs director for the Weber State Democrats.
So let's jump right into it. So, for young people in Utah who are frustrated with the direction of the state but still want to make a difference, what is your message to them about why the Democratic Party is worth investing their time and energy in?
Well, frustration and anxiety or whatever it is that you're feeling about today's political situation can be hard to deal with, but one of the ways of effectively dealing with it, I think, is to use it as a motivator to get involved, to make a difference. Nothing's worse than feeling anxious or frustrated and then not being able to feel that there's anything you can do. Getting involved in politics is something that helps you feel like you're channeling those energies in a way that is productive. So, look, being involved as a Democrat is something that I've done for many, many years. At times it has its own frustration. Things move slowly. You realize that not everyone views a solution to the problem that you see in the same way you do. And, it takes time and energy. And so it's not any cure-all to get involved in politics. But it's better than the alternative. Because the alternative is just walking away, shrugging your shoulders and giving up, or putting your head in the sand. And look, we can't afford to do that right now. The problems that we face are too important.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. Whenever I give a speech or do a tabling event or do anything like that, beforehand I might have felt very discouraged by what's going on. But after taking action and you see people respond to it, it's an amazing thing. But yeah, anyone else have any more questions before I move on to my next one?
I was just going to ask, a lot of people on both sides of the political spectrum just want to completely disassociate and not interact with the opposing side because it's just so emotional, So what's some common ground that you think Democrats could find with Utah Republicans?
That question causes me to think back on a story that I can tell you from my time when I was running for governor. I was down in Pleasant Grove in Utah County, about as red a place as you can imagine, and I was sitting at a picnic table talking to some people that I'd never met before. I had my lieutenant governor running mate with me, Rebecca Cummings, and this guy said to me, you Democrats, I just I don't want anything to do with you because I think of socialism and communism. And I said, well, I don't know. I mean, I like the road that I drove on to get here, and we all gathered together our resources to pay for that. This park that we're sitting on, that wasn't created by just capitalism and private activity. That was us as a community coming together to make something that all of us can enjoy. And I talked about clean water and sewers. I mean, all the things that we take for granted. And he listened to me and he said, well, you're kind of making sense. So I mean, what we have to do is, it's easy. It's never been easier to have people in their silos of information so that they don't understand and they don't want to take the time to try to understand what other people are thinking. We've got to recognize that sometimes it's because people are in their silos and they don't get access to good information that's fact-based. But we've got to make sure that we, as Democrats, reach out in a way that demonstrates genuine concern for not just ourselves, but for our community at large, and not just people who think like we do about issues, but for people who disagree with us, and say to them, hey, listen, you are hurt. I want to understand where you come from. And I want you to know I care about you and your family, and I care about your needs. And I want to find some common ground here. I want to find some way to work together to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish and get done. If you can do that, I mean, it's so connected to just basic relationships. It's not about policies and philosophies of politics. It's about, do you understand what I'm going through in my life?
Yeah.
And what are you going to do do you have a commitment to help me get through that stuff? That's really critically important.
No, that's a great response. And we just had last week the chair of the Weber County Democrats on, and one thing that he said that really stuck with me is that when you take someone who has a certain view on an issue that might seem kind of hateful, he said it's more often than not ignorance and not malice. And ever since he said that, I just keep seeing that come up again and again. And with that guy, like he just kind of, bunches up Democrats with communism and socialism and doesn't really know the difference between any of them. So it's really just trying to educate them and so they fully understand.
Yeah. Well, it's easy to demonize people. And look, people on the left do this to people on the right too. I mean, I find myself sometimes pulled in the direction of thinking, boy, that guy's a moron or that woman is nuts or, and the fact is they're not that much different than I am. They just have different sources of information. And if we got together and just talked, there's a lot of things we'd have in common.
Yeah, and I think that really hits kind of close to home with me personally because one of the classes I just finished up this semester was it's a joint class. It's English composition, but also it's information literacy. And those used to be two separate classes, but because of budget cuts in the legislature, Weber State has actually had to cut all of our information literacy classes. So now we no longer have the course by which to educate students, regardless of political affiliation, about how to spot misinformation, how to debunk misinformation, how to think critically about the information that we're consuming, not just how to take whatever information that we have and put it into like a synthesis, but actually be able to process the information for what it is itself.
Right. So, and that's unfortunate. I mean, one of the things that's frustrating to me is that we've had a legislature, and this was happening before I left the legislature. I've been out of the legislature now for a little more than a year, but for a long time there was a real skepticism and hostility toward higher education and critical thinking, quite honestly. I mean, it's what you just said, Alexandra. I mean, we're not going to get very far solving problems if we can't be fair-minded, but also careful about exploring and probing carefully information that people are trying to push onto us that just oftentimes isn't fact-based. It isn't accurate.
Yeah, and it's especially heinous now, I think, with the rise of all this generative AI with things like Sora, ChatGPT, and all this kind of stuff, where information doesn't even have to be wrong. It could just be
misleading,
completely fabricated.
Yeah.
Right, where you could have, video evidence, text evidence, this, that, or the other, where you can say, oh no, we have seen these things, but those things never happened. They don't exist.
Right.
And so I think that kind of fear and criticism of thinking and education is something that sort of I think everyone in this room could agree is harmful.
And my hope, to your point, is that because it's easier than it's ever been to pass off something and say, well, look, did you watch the video? I mean, it's obviously true. And people now are faced with the need for more than ever to think critically and say, well, let's look behind that. Who created it? What is the basis for it? All that kind of stuff. I mean, it's more obvious that we need to be careful about what we accept and don't accept. And once that obviousness becomes more clear, I think it causes people to say, okay, I'm going to be more careful about what I accept or don't accept,
And a quick question I had is, here on campus, when we table a lot, we've heard a statement come up multiple times where they say the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are just two tents in the same circus. And so my question to you is, what would you say to people who feel that they don't have change? Like, they know that being politically active does give them a sense of self and a sense of, like, I'm helping, but how do you feel, or what would you say to people who think that their actions don't really matter because it's all just one big circus, as they say?
I'm so glad you asked that question. It's a great question. False equivalence. Both sides do it. Therefore, don't come after me when I engage in bad behavior because you have a bunch of people that do the same thing. Look, it's easy to do that. It's a cop-out, though. I mean, it gets back to this critical thinking idea. We, as human beings, have to make difficult choices. And it's not very common and it doesn't happen very often that one side is clearly right and the other side is clearly wrong. I mean, I actually think that our political situation today with who's in the White House, it is pretty clear. But, there are times when you have to make choices between alternatives, none of which are perfect, and none of which are entirely wrong and bad. It requires that we really work hard to get to the bottom of things and make the best choices that we can, sometimes with imperfect knowledge, sometimes, with people who are trying to put a spin on something from different perspectives, and so you can't just look at one person and say, you're entirely trustworthy and you're entirely lying. It's more nuanced. It's more complicated than that. And we as human beings are more nuanced than that. So we just have to, I think, work hard to figure out who's saying what and why they're saying it. Follow the money has been something that has been a common refrain in terms of helping people understand what works and what doesn't work. And I like that. I think that you got to be watching to see if there are financial interests involved in what a particular individual or group is promoting, as opposed to, whether the individual who's speaking is just obviously doing it because they really honestly feel that's going to be the best policy for Utah or whatever it is.
Yes, great point. So my next question is, young voters care a lot about whether the party will actually fight, not just issue statements. What does fighting back look like for Utah Democrats when Republicans hold such a strong institutional advantage?
Yeah, fighting. It's interesting. I had a guy who served in Vietnam who said to me, I hate it when you say, or other people within the party say that they want to fight, because I don't think that's a productive way forward. So fighting to me means standing up for the right thing for the right reason. It means having the courage to say things even when it's difficult to say them. It means speaking for people who don't have the resources and the time or the energy to speak up for themselves. I think one of the things that I'm most proud of as a Democrat is that we are committed to representing and speaking for marginalized and vulnerable communities. We've always been that way. I've been a Democrat my whole life. But it also ties in for me to my religious background. I'm an active LDS guy. I've said to many, many people for many years, look, I'm a Democrat because of the teachings of the LDS Church. And I continue to believe that. So one of the things that I think is important is that we, as Democrats, stand up and fight, quote unquote. Advocate for is another way of saying fight. Another thing that we want to do when we say fight is don't be compromised quickly, even though there are powerful interests that are adverse to us, whether it's contributors who have given us money or whether it's a constituency that we know supports us ordinarily, but we may have to look at it and say, I don't know about this, It's very interesting with regard to Israel, for example, right now. That's sort of a hot button topic for people, right? I mean, we've seen some things going on with Israel, whether it's Gaza or whether it's Benjamin Netanyahu jerking around, who comes in and sort of yanks the chain on, puts a collar around Donald Trump and yanks the chain to say, hey, this is what I want you to do. But look, Democrats have traditionally been really supportive of Israel. And it's hard for some Democrats to say, maybe we shouldn't just do whatever it is that the promoters and backers of Israel want us to do, because they're not showing themselves as worthy to be supported in quite the uncritical thinking way that we've done in the past. I think actually that's a good thing. I mean, I think we ought to stand up when we see behavior or words from any particular group, even if they're a traditional group that has always supported us, and be ready to question whether they're on the right track. So, fighting for people, first and foremost, I think we need to make sure that we're fighting for people who are just trying to get by in their day-to-day lives with, whether it's, we talk about affordability a lot, but there aren't nearly as many candidates and elected officials as there need to be fighting for everyday working Utahns. And it's an area where Democrats have traditionally tried to stand up for them. I think we can do a much better job. And if we don't, we shouldn't get elected.
Right, and let me ask one more question, then I'll allow you guys to. I just don't want this to get lost. So what are some of your strategies, or, what are we doing differently, or what would you say to assure people that we're doing all we can to win races, even outside of Salt Lake, such as SD5 or HD10? Yeah. How is the state party planning to support these candidates, after convention and all that jazz?
Yeah. We worked hard the last 6 months of last year to recruit great candidates, and we did. I mean, in HD10, we've recruited Rosemary Lesser. She, the day after she lost that election in 2024, said, I'm running again. And her opponent, I think, was afraid of that and said, okay, I'm not going to run for re-election in HD10. I'm going to run for the Senate seat. We've got two great candidates in the Senate seat that are running to succeed Ann Milner. So, number one, get good candidates. Number two, you got to have an infrastructure as a party to provide the support that those candidates need. We're putting together a great coordinated campaign that involves resources being available to the candidates, whether it's volunteers or whether it's help in raising funds or whether it's help in finding campaign managers and things like that, or interns. So there are things that the party can and needs to do to ensure that all candidates across the state, but particularly in competitive districts, have the resources that they need to win races. One of the things that I spend an awful lot of time doing, quite honestly, is calling people and asking for money. I raise money for the party. If we don't have a financial structure for the Utah Democratic Party that is allowing us to hire the right people and make sure that we have, again, infrastructure that will not just work for 2, 3, 4 months before an election, but be working on an ongoing permanent basis, we're not going to have a strong party. So money is important, and we've got some great individuals who are contributing to the party on a monthly basis. They give, $50, $25, $100 on a monthly basis. We have hundreds of those kind of people. That's the backbone of the party in terms of the finances.
Awesome. Yeah. You guys have any more questions?
And I really like what you had to say about sort of the Israeli problem and sort of the issue of bringing sort of working class Utahns into the fold, because as someone, I work for a living, right? My current job is a little bit nicer than when I used to, but I used to pull 10, 12-hour nights stocking shelves at a Winco and like cashiering. And the thing that I would sort of hear a lot, just because I like to chat with people, is that it is the sort of working class, it is the people who either have to work insane hours, insane shifts,
or 2 or 3 jobs.
2 or 3 jobs, or who can't get a job because of just the way that they've been disenfranchised. How would you sort of embolden that base of people who aren't just sort of disillusioned because they read the news, watch the news all day, but people who are disillusioned because they have been actively let down by the system? What is your strategy to sort of not embolden, but to bring those people into the fold of electoral politics?
Yeah. You look at, I think of Mamdani in New York, and he's not the only one, of course, but he's sort of the highest profile one recently who has really spoken to and got a base of support from working New Yorkers, working people in Manhattan and the other boroughs, to say, all right, we're going to support this guy because he is speaking about stuff that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. He's speaking about transportation costs. He's speaking about affordable housing here in New York. And so one of the things that you got to do if you're a candidate or if you're a party, if you can't address the needs of regular people, you shouldn't get elected. And this is a difference between us and Republicans, quite honestly, is that the Republican Party and its leadership has been quick to say the people that we really want to curry favor with are the wealthiest in our society, the biggest corporations and the wealthiest individuals. Okay, I can see why you feel that way, Republicans, because there's a ton of money that'll come to you if you do that. The problem is, of course, you're not addressing people's needs. You're not making life easier for the great majority of Utahns or New York City people or people across the country. And until we can address people's needs as elected officials and as politicians, we're not worthy of their support. And people, to your point, this idea of being cynical and sitting on the sidelines, of course you're going to sit on the sidelines if you think that, like every other elected candidate or elected official or candidate who's seeking elected office, they say all the right things to get your vote, and then they don't deliver. If we as Democrats can't and don't deliver, we're not going to win elections. It's as simple as that. I mean, look, I'm a Democrat in Utah, for crying out loud. I know what kind of a tilted playing field I face in terms of my co-religionists particularly, but all Utahns who are raised in a very conservative culture and who, when you ask them who they're going to vote for, if they don't know anything else and it's between a D and an R, they're going to say, well, I'm voting for the Republican. I mean, that's just what they were raised with. I've got to work harder to make sure that they understand why we as Democrats are worthy of their vote. And to do that, you've got to make clear to them I'm going to address your problems and your needs that you have on a day-to-day basis. Simple as that.
And to that point, sort of one thing that's always been important for me is sort of building community outside of the election cycles. So how, as the chair of our state's Democratic Party, how would you sort of, worst case scenario, say we don't get any of the Democrats that we want in the seats that we want them to be in, how then can the party serve the communities that are most important to our sort of electoral base outside of actual elected office? Like what sort of, mutual aid, like what programs do we have as a party outside of the actual state house to uplift those people?
And outside of the time period immediately preceding an election, totally right. And one of the things that we try to do, and we're trying to do a better job of building this infrastructure, I talked about infrastructure before. When I came in, we had 2 full-time employees of the party when I came in as the chair. That was about a year ago. It was after the 2024 election. Trump had gotten reelected. People were discouraged. We cannot have a party that goes in these huge ebbs and peaks, where we bring in a bunch of money, we hire a bunch of people in the 6 months before an election, then when the election happens, everybody goes away, all the money goes away, and we can't maintain the infrastructure as a party to make sure that we keep showing up. We've got to show up for people in their, again, it gets back to their day-to-day lives, whether it's a service project, whether it's, community activities, whether it is, last year, one of the fun things that we did as a party leadership is we went up to Peach Days in Brigham City. It was like the first weekend in September. We had such a fun time. It's just being visible. It's just showing up to people in their day-to-day lives. Look, it's great to go paint a fence or to mow somebody's grass in their yard or, help in some way. We ought to be doing that stuff, obviously. But we also just ought to be showing up in communities as Democrats to say, we're here, we want to get to know you, we want to understand what problems you've got, and we want to tell you what ideas we have for solving those problems and addressing those problems. So I think, if you view your role as an activist within either party, any party, as it only applies in the 8 or 10 or 12 weeks before the election, you're missing the boat. This is who we have to be and who we are on a day-to-day basis all the time. We have to be serving people. And if we can't do that because we genuinely care about these things, we don't deserve to get elected.
And just really quickly, I'm just curious here because we faced a lot of issues here in Utah, and one of those being Prop 4. What would you say right now is the biggest issue that you face as a Democrat in Utah? Or just something personal for you that you really want to see changed or that you really want to see different?
Well, I'll tell you, I for the entire time I was in the legislature, we were in a super minority. In other words, it wasn't just the minority party, it was by 2/3 and less that the Republicans held the majority. I was, for my 16 years in the legislature, 8 of those years, I was the minority leader in the House, and people would introduce me and they'd say, this is the minority leader, Brian King, and I'd say, you're insulting me. I'm not the minority leader. I'm the super minority leader. and people would sort of look at me with this curious look like, what are you talking about, dude? Most of them got it like you guys did. But the point is, it's a frustrating thing to not be able to be in a position to have a say. And we've got to make sure we do a better job of bringing competition to the field. And I've said to many people, we would all be really unhappy if we had a monopoly on where we could buy our milk. If there were only 1 or 2 grocery stores in Ogden to get your milk or your eggs from, everybody would go, oh, that's terrible. We need competition. Why in the world don't we talk about and recognize the benefits and the need for healthy competition politically? We've had one party run this state, a supermajority, for decades. And as a result, they have gotten to a point where they freely abuse their powers. They're eviscerating, they're just emasculating the state judiciary here, and they're happy to do it. They're emasculating or try to emasculate the ability of regular Utahns to have a say via initiatives or referendums on making law. And you mark my words, they're going to continue to do that. They're going to try and eliminate our ability to pass anti-gerrymandering statutes like Prop 4 and things like that. And if they do, and the only people in town who have a say is going to be the legislature, we'll all be poorer for that. So I would like to see, to answer your question, healthier competition among political. More Democrats getting elected, obviously, is a huge part of that. But I'd like people with regard to get more concerned about the problems that are created by a lack of competition.
Awesome. Well, it's 3 now, so I think, unless you want to do one more, is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be
sure.
great. Just one more. So you said that it is because of the LDS teachings of your church that you are a Democrat. To me, that seems like a no-brainer. Seems like common sense.
Yeah.
But why is it not in Utah? It seems like, to me, it seems like that with just transgender and gay rights and then reproductive rights, those are kind of pushed as religious issues, and that seems to be the reason. But
yeah, no, I think you're on the right track there from my perspective. I'll tell you something interesting that's happened over the last 30 or 40 years, and that is Republican strategists and tacticians are smart, and they have said, if we can move people, if we can combine people's feelings about hot button issues emotionally and religiously and morally and combine that with where they are politically, oh, that would be powerful. And they're right. It is powerful. And we've seen that happen in Utah. We've seen it with evangelical churchgoers across the country. The highest correlation of people voting for Republicans within religions are evangelical, but close second, LDS church voters, which I have to tell you causes me such heartache because, I just think it's inconsistent. I think so much of what is happening in terms of what Republican and MAGA voters are doing these days is inconsistent with a good understanding of, the teachings of the New Testament and the teachings of the Book of Mormon and the Doctrine and Covenants, all those things. And I talk to people about this all the time, and many times people say, yeah, you're right. And many times people look at me like I'm absolutely nuts, and they say, you can't be a good LDS church member if you're a Democrat, Brian. It's as simple as that. And they usually point to the things that you're talking about.
yeah,
The LGBT, the gender issues, the abortion issues. And, we could talk a lot more at length on those things as to why I think that's lacks a fundamental good understanding of where the LDS Church is on those issues. But I won't get into that here. It's enough to say the LDS Church has always been skeptical of majorities that are based on money and based on just power alone. They've always looked out for the interests of vulnerable communities and marginalized communities, just like this guy who was walking around around Nazareth 2,000 years ago was talking about and acting. One of the things I read the New Testament back through again, not within the last year, and I was absolutely struck by the degree to which Jesus was constantly challenging those in authority.
Yeah.
He was an anti-authoritarian. He was saying, you guys are abusing your power. It reminded me of how I felt every day up in the legislature dealing with the Republicans. Not that I'm anything like Jesus, but, I could relate to this idea of, oh my gosh, I'm seeing abuse of power left and right by people who have the most authority. And that's, I think, the essence, one aspect of the essence of who that guy was and what his approach to living was. And it's something that we should incorporate into our own lives, in my humble opinion. So,
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brian King, chair of the Utah Democratic Party, definitely the highest status guest we've had on here. So we're moving up in the world.
Hey, look, I'm so glad you guys called. I'm happy to do this. This is fun.
Yeah, we're going to have Obama on next. That's the next step.
Get him in here.
Yeah. All right. Have a nice day or night, everybody. And see you next semester. Well, we'll have the other podcast with Danielle, but see you next semester.
Thanks, guys.